Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It is time, or maybe past time, for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I have read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general chit-chat and catch-up on my life that's gone on in the past week. So I read two things this week, and they were both very positive. So I think we're back after last week being a bit of a negative anomaly. So let's dive into the two books. The first was a real hit, and I think this is generally a hit across booktube. And for March Mystery Madness, I read 3 Bags Full by Leonie Swann and translated from German by Anthea Bell. This was published, I think, in the early 2000s, if I recall. I did look it up and now I just can't remember. It's not important. I picked this up, though, because it has recently been translated to English. And was previously only available in German. It is also being made into a film very imminently, starring, I think, Pierce Brosnan, among others. Big names. It's going to be, I think, fantastic. But the important part about this is you can obviously see sheep are prominent because they are our main characters. We are following a flock of sheep as they investigate the death of their shepherd, George. And so that sounds ridiculous, but it's so wonderful. And I think the best way I can frame this is by the fact that midway through the book, I was kind of struck by the similarities to Terry Pratchett's Discworld. Not necessarily in the sense of humor or the type of story, that's a fantasy world, but in the core of it being about understanding the world through a different perspective. And that's something that Terry Pratchett really does significantly. And the reason I was struck with that is because there's this whole conversation between the sheep about justice and what is justice. And these sheep brains trying to grapple with what that means. And in Terry Pratchett's book, Snuff, there's almost a identical conversation. In Snuff, we have a police officer who's kind of gone out to the country for a vacation. And in that, he encounters for the first time the severe racism and bigotry toward the goblin people. And the goblins very much remind me of the sheep in that everyone sort of perceives them as very simple and very different from human beings and kind of deny their personhood. And here, the people are not aware that the sheep are smart or anything. Like, they're not talking sheep. They're humanized in a way, but not like totally anthropomorphized. They are thinking in a sheepy way, that's for sure. And I love that perception where you are getting a truly different mind and being forced into that perspective to think through and give respect to a different way of thinking. And so some of the things are a little bit silly and humorous, but they just delighted me so much. It charmed me, these sheep. And I love the eyes on these sheep. Like, that really is the perception of the sheep. Most of their investigating just sort of involves them wandering and grazing over and being overlooked by people because they're sheep. So they can just be there to hear things that people say. And then they grapple with, well, what does that actually mean? And perceiving things from their sheep perspective differently than humans would. At one point, they're deeply scandalized because another shepherd comes to their field and kind of brings his flock around but keeps them penned in. And he grazes the grass with a scythe and doesn't eat it, and that's horrifying. He takes the grass to his sheep, obviously. But like, they're horrified by this idea of grazing the grass without eating it. And just all of those little touches, I think, were very present. We also get a really small community. This is written in German, but yet the book here, I don't know if this is updated for the English version, I assume not, but it's set in Ireland, in Glenkill, Ireland, in a very small rural community. And so a lot of the community relationships and history is very present. And so the sheep kind of know some of it and don't know all of it, and are uncovering parts of it as they go along. I will read, there's a warning at the back that I will read you that doesn't spoil anything, but it gives you a really, really great sense of the sort of tone of the book. So I think the humor you'll get out of this, you will be able to derive. A note of warning. The sheep of Glenkill are exceptional sheep. Ordinary sheep don't tolerate alcohol, drugs, or tomatoes. I must ask my readers not to tempt sheep to take any narcotic substances or plants of the nightshade family. If you really want to give a sheep something nice, try a moderate amount of bread or a genuine grass. And I like that in that it's a little bit cheeky, but not over the top silly. And that really felt like what this was. So I don't feel like I can say much else without getting into spoilers because it is a mystery. But this is a duology, and I enjoyed this so much that I did already pick up the second book to read. So I'm really excited to get into it. That should tell you exactly how much I enjoyed this. So probably not like a favorite of the year, but it is one that, and I think this is thematic of my reading recently. It's something I just really enjoyed inhabiting and spending time in. So it was really great to read. The other book that I read was Queen Victoria's Mysterious Daughter, a biography of Princess Louise by Lucinda Hawksley. And this is a good-sized biography, and I really enjoyed this one, though I struggle to talk about it. So I was interested in reading about Louise because last year, one of my favorite nonfiction of the year was Your Dear Letter, the collected letters of Queen Victoria with a different daughter, with her daughter who was in Prussia. Louise was not. Louise was primarily between Britain and Canada, and she was the problem child. So in those letters that I was reading last year, Queen Victoria and the daughter were writing back and forth, constantly referring to Louise in these very much terms of endearment, but also what an odd duck she was. And so she really stood out, and I was curious. And reading this, you can understand why, because she did her own thing, like very, very much. And I love that about her. But the reason I struggle to talk about this is because this is just a sort of a pile of moments about her and just all of these individual details. There's not really a narrative to her life that's told here. And I kind of like that because I like getting all these little details, but it's hard to pile that into something to talk about. She was just such an interesting person, though. I think the main broad strokes elements are that she was very bohemian and artistic as a person. She was the only one of Queen Victoria's children to marry a commoner and was dead set that she was not going to be married off to a foreign royal like all her siblings. And so she married this commoner who also became a governor general of Canada. So she spent a lot of time there. Lake Louise, lots of things there are named for her or related to her naming. She was really prominent and visible there. And she seems to have generally been so widely loved despite not following norms of the time at all. And every time that seemed to upset things, a lot of times it was the social perception of her relationship with her husband, who seems to have been gay by all accounts and rumors of the time, and very well substantiated pretty much, other than the only way it could be more substantial is if he had openly declared that he was gay. But their being an abnormal couple, I think it charmed me, and they seem to have had affairs and not really fit the typical mold, and that at times upset people. But they always were won back over by Louise. It doesn't seem to have been, most of the time, her not fitting traditional gender roles. Even with her husband, he grudgingly and very seriously barred her from playing billiards because that was very offensive to him. And yet she still did it anyway. And they continued to have this relatively happy marriage in whatever capacity that they did. She was a suffragist, despite the fact that was pretty openly against her family. She was such a progressive and artistic type that really moved in circles of people that were pushing the world forward. She was compassionate and empathetic to both people of a lower class than her and the plight of animals as well. She always had wonderful dogs around her and just was so full of care for people. And I think there's a certain amount of that you see from royals as a duty, but in her, you could generally feel it. And so whenever public sentiment would go against her, it almost always quickly came back. At one point, she got into a major accident and people thought that she was overplaying it. And then when they found out how bad it actually was, everyone came around and rallied around her again. It was just such a delight to read all of those little details about her life. So much of this was very informative. Being American, I basically didn't know anything about her or really any of the other children within Victoria's circle. Her contentious relationship with her mother is something that kind of came across in the letters, but not entirely. Again, being American, I didn't know how pervasive the sanitization by royals of letters and documents was after their death. But it's pretty clear that huge amounts of that sort of correspondence get destroyed by family members after they die in order to assure that nothing controversial would be in the remaining records for people to report on after their death. And so that comes up multiple times here. I've heard about it outside of that, but I didn't realize just how much it was. So when I talked about the nonfiction books last week, I talked a lot about sourcing. When I initially picked this up, my hackles went up because this has a long, long list of sources, but it does not have citations for things like quotes. And so hackles were raised, but I will vouch for this one as being an excellent, excellent example of doing it right, because every excerpt, pretty much, every quotation, it's worked into the text very, very well. So you can tell through the text exactly this came from a letter written by this person on this day or in this month of this year. And it just was so smoothly worked through the text that I didn't feel I needed that to know exactly where the information came from. We also had maybe a larger amount of speculation in this than I like from a nonfiction book, but again, I feel like I can vouch for this one in that area because it was founded. Because as I just said, a lot of the documentation is gone. So there are many cases where the author says, here's what the rumors were or the speculation of society was at the time or even today, and here are the things we still have or we actually can substantiate about that. And even at times, going through different theories and saying, okay, this piece of information that we have substantiates this other piece of information substantiates the conflicting theory. So I don't feel the author is taking sides in speculating. She's just following the natural progression of here are the things that people were saying at the time, and here's what we can actually say. And I really, really liked that approach. So I feel like this had excellent veracity as a nonfiction work, despite the lack of citations. I think it really was exceptional in that way. So I think that I talked a little bit about her being an artist, but I hadn't realized, and to her sort of bucking the trend of gender norms, she was a sculptor, and that was viewed as very masculine of the time, but she was world class. Like, she was super respected, and I may just insert this, but she did a sculpture of her mother for that was placed in Montreal, and I believe it's still there today, or was there till recently at least. And just the detail is incredible. So she was moving in these artistic and very intellectual circles. It was very funny because coming up in my later updates, I watched Bridgerton, and it reminded me a lot of this season's character of Bridgerton, who is kind of in that very bohemian and not following in with the rigidity of that era. So I just enjoyed this so much. I feel like I can't even begin to get across all of the things I learned from this, all the little tidbits and details. I think one really cool thing that's totally unrelated to her that came up, and she was very for and outspoken about during World War I. Obviously, there was this prominent move of men being off to war and women taking over their jobs. Something that I'm very aware of in current day is how when we truly blind in academia, we know that girls and women perform better than men do. And here, I think I exposed my own bias in reading this, that I would have expected the men who are going off to war to have performed better in factory work. But in fact, coming out in that time in Britain, they were finding that the women were performing better after taking over their jobs. They had almost no time to train, so they were getting minimal training, a few hours in some cases, and yet their level of quality and efficiency and productivity were much better. And so I think that, again, confronted me with my own biases and is something that I'm interested to look into more. Something I wrote in my brainstorming page of history that I want to look into because that is really fascinating to me. And I think something that, in the estimation of today's academics, in a lot of areas that is coming to light, that this may reinforce further that this is something we need a lot more research on today. And it's not a criticism, but it is something that we need to research, look into potential ways of changing that by way of whatever the research supports. And we as a society need to reckon with why there is such a disparity there. So interesting that was happening in that area and this far back, like 100 years ago. So I got so much out of it. It's just a lot. So this was very slow going though. The two nonfiction that I really didn't like last week, I only finished because they were really fast, easy reading. And this week, all my reading felt very, very slow and laborious. So I feel like I need something a little bit easier and lighter for this next week. So those are what I read. And continuing with the things I'm spending some labor on is The Beat Queen by Louise. I'm really enjoying this so far. I'm doing a buddy read of this, and it is kind of slow going because I'm really trying to pull out the details. And that really is the case with the previous book, where it was slow going because I was so honed in on wanting to pick up every detail. And so I was rereading things and just really taking my time with it, which is fun. But it's hard when all of the books you're reading are like that. So I'm working on Beat Queen. I am audiobooking. Oh wait, I'm also reading Fall, but I don't think I've made any progress since I held it up last week because I basically sat down and read this like very quickly through about 70 pages and then just haven't had time to pick it up because I've had other priorities. And audiobooking, I am working on Bittersweet Magic. They're all very similar titles, but the third in the Baking Up a Magical Midlife series, which is kind of light listening, more or less. And then next up, I'm starting today, A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. The next in the Wayfarers series, because I quite enjoyed the first one. So that's 4 books. The things that I finished watching this week, as I mentioned, Bridgerton season 4 was so good. I'm positive I mentioned several times the past couple weeks that I was saving it for when I really, really needed it, just needed a pure escape. And I got to that point this week. It was a tough and busy week, so I just did not have the mental space for anything. So it was the perfect escape. And I wanted to have more time for it, or have more episodes to go for it, but it just blazed by. And I really enjoyed this season. I feel like it covered so much ground, and we had this great couple at the center that I could get behind, and so much else that has been progressing over the course of the entire series that was great. So many perfect moments, and the development and progression of characters that we've been seeing over the course of this series, that it is a series that continues to charm me, and I really enjoy it every single time. Every single season has been great. So I finished Bridgerton season 4. I also watched The Importance of Being Earnest because National Theatre put out a fundraising post of the latest, I think, production of it, starring Ncuti Gatwa and Hugh Skinner, I believe. And it was out, I think, on Friday or Thursday. And I watched, intending to just watch part of it and then pause and start after the intermission later. And I ended up watching the whole thing. It was so good. It's kind of a over the top, like, Importance of Being Earnest is already a comedy and kind of silly, but they went over the top, very flamboyant and very sort of loud performances. Not vocally loud, but just very extreme version of the way this story is told. And I think Ncuti Gatwa was perfect for that, but it was just such a fun time to watch. So I believe it's still out there on the National Theatre's YouTube channel, so I will make sure to link it in the description if you want to check it out. But yeah, it was a great also escape to watch. The other thing I've been doing, escapism is really ruling the day, is Slay the Spire. Not a TV show, it is a video game. Slay the Spire 2 just came out for early access. I mean, it's a fully formed game. They're just kind of working through the bugs, more or less, but I haven't run into any. And it's so fun. It is eating up a lot of time for me, so that's been great because I have needed that right now. If you are a board gamer at all, this is very like board gamey because you have a map that is just kind of a traditional board game where you can see each of the spaces that you can move to, and you have multiple options for routes to get from the start to a boss at the end of the map. And then there are several like multiple different levels of the map. And so you can kind of tell what is on each route, mostly with a few question marks, and pick what route you think you can get through best. And then you have multiple different types of classes. But all of the actual gameplay is using cards. So it's a pretty traditional board gaming deck builder style. And it's so fun. It's really, really fun. So there was a deal, though, for both the first and the second together. So I got both, and I played a little bit of Slay the Spire 1 and then played a lot of Slay the Spire 2 because I had never played it before. So that was very, very fun. And I was a little chagrined because this weekend I've been so busy, I guess into the life stuff. I was so busy this weekend that I didn't have any time to play. So I'm kind of looking forward to tonight. I get some time to play. I will be kind of caught up on everything that I have to do. But the weekend was, well, I guess first we have to talk about the weather of the week, because the whole week was a chaotic weather week where I think last Monday was like 85. And I'll put in Celsius temperatures after the fact on the screen somewhere here, but very, very much summer temperatures. And yesterday, Sunday, a week later, we had storms and a cold front blowing in, dropping down to like 15 degrees and snow. So everything has been really chaotic as far as the weather. And that meant that this weekend, I had multiple things going on, and I had a birthday party yesterday that ended up being all day, which was fine, but it took out a big chunk of time and is a significant drive for me. So I was supposed to be going to an outdoor event, and it ended up being an indoor event because of the weather. I come home, and about 5 minutes after I got home, the east side of my house was like normal and sunny and bright, and the west side of my house was pitch dark. And I was like, oh, okay, because that cold front and massive temperature change was just blowing in storms, which is why we had moved to indoors as well, because just super windy all day. And so within a few minutes beyond that, it was dumping down rain, sleet started coming down, the tornado sirens were going off. It was wild. So I thought I was going to have time after last night to film when I got home, and no, there was no way I could film because I ended up just being in pitch dark, and the tornado sirens left me stuck in the basement. So I didn't think I wanted to film from the basement in the dark. So yeah, so that was chaotic. Otherwise, like nothing significant of note that was going on this week. It was just a lot of stuff piled up that needed to get done. And I feel like that keeps happening to me, and it's very, very annoying because I just want to be free and not feel like I have a list of things to check off. And I do think this week I have multiple things to do that I again have to check off. But when I'm done with that, I will, I think, have a good free week the following week where I have no obligations, basically. So that's nice. I mean, I also have started having my gaming earlier in the day, so that's now taking up a big chunk of my Saturdays. And I think, I can't remember if I mentioned this, but I have a regular board gaming group, and we are playing an ongoing game of Gloomhaven, which is a very fun game. It's kind of styled very much like pen and paper tabletop games, like you would think of D&D, but it's all pre-formatted as a board game. So it comes with the game figures, and the characters are somewhat preset, and then you get to make choices about how they level up and stuff like that. And it's a pre-built campaign for you, but you can go ongoing play and keep playing it for a very, very long time. So we've been playing that for months now. So I do that every week basically as well. So now that is a big chunk of my weekend too, dedicated to that, because we have started earlier since we have no more work conflicts anymore against that. But that means that my usual filming and editing day now has a little bit of chunk taken out of it. So that's fine. That's fine. It means I do get to go to bed earlier on that night, which is nice. Although this week we ended up playing very, very late as it was, so I didn't get to go to bed earlier. So it's just been a very packed, but fine, like nothing I didn't want to be packed with this week. Okay, so anyway, last things. I think that is all for what's going on in life. I'm looking forward to my reading this week. We've got lots of good stuff. In my recommendations for this week, I really only have one thing, books from my bookshelf. Did a Women's History Month themed video talking about women who were influential to literary history. So great and somewhat long, but well-researched video. I really enjoyed that. So check that one out. And then, as I said, I will link the video for the performance of Importance of Being Earnest down below as well, if you, like me, are a fan of the theater. So anyway, I think that's all for my week this week, and thank you so much for checking in with me. As always, this has been Rambling Chaos. I hope you have a wonderful week in reading and in life, and thank you so very much for watching.